Listeners, let's just get right into it today. I'm sitting here with Laith Hermez. And Laith, can you tell us something about investing in net lease deals that might surprise us?
Sure. Actually, how easy and quick it is to get into this business. The interesting thing about the net lease market is that it's the most fragmented space within commercial real estate. There's literally thousands and thousands of these little rectangles throughout the country. And so for those people that are ready to dip their toe into commercial real estate, I think it's sort of the best asset class that you could jump into.
Thank you for that, Laith. And I am grateful you're with us today. Listeners, we're grateful that you are here with us. You are listening to The Source of Commercial Real Estate, where we talk to the experts in non-residential commercial real estate. I am your host, Jonathan Hayek, and I achieved financial freedom through real estate, mostly residential real estate investing. And now I invest in larger commercial deals, preferring single tenant industrial properties. Today, I am talking with Laith Hermez. Laith founded Ironside Realty to transform long-term relationships into high-quality development projects and acquisition opportunities. As founder and CEO of Ironside Realty, Laith is responsible for the execution of company strategy, including implementing and directing all development and investment transactions and guidance for all asset management activities. He does it all. Uh, Laith has a ton of experience in net lease, real estate, and investing, and I am thrilled to be talking with him. Laith, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Excited to get into this conversation.
Well, you already gave us a little bit of insight about your investing philosophy, but why don't we back up and why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got started in real estate, and what your work looks like today?
Sounds good. So I started originally on the legal side. So I'm an attorney by trade. I practiced for a few years with a boutique firm that specialized in real estate transactions and corporate work. And then I very quickly realized that I wanted to be the guy on the other side of the table and that the developers were much cooler than the attorneys. And so I was fortunate enough to make that switch. I started in the industrial and R&D sector and in the Detroit metropolitan area market where I worked for a boutique firm that specialized in developing for some of the big three automotive manufacturers. And then that quickly translated into about a 17-year stint in the public REIT space. Initially, I worked as one of the head developers for a shopping center REIT called Ramco Gershenson Shopping Center Group. That company at the time was a top 6 publicly traded shopping center REIT in the country. They've been rebranded as RPT and actually are currently being acquired by Kimco, which is the largest shopping center REIT in the United States today. So it was a great opportunity. This is back when you could actually develop grocery anchored centers and power centers. And so that brought a tremendous amount of experience to the table and some great relationships on the retailer side with a lot of the names you've known, such as, Publix, Target, some of the major boxes. And so then in 2010, I was recruited by a company called Agree Realty. At the time, Agree was a microcap REIT. They specialized in single tenant net lease retail development. I was brought in along with their current CEO and another gentleman. We launched their acquisition platform in 2010, and we were fortunate enough to grow that company from about 73 properties to 1,600 properties in about a 12-year span. Today, Agree is one of the top, I'd say, 2 or 3 net lease REITs in the country. And then in 2011, I made the decision to get out on my own and started Ironside Realty. We're headquartered here in Nashville, Tennessee. But we transact nationally.
And will you tell us a little bit more about Ironside, what types of deals that you do, who your tenants are, what your focus is?
Sure. So our focus is basically investing in single tenant assets, primarily retail, although we do some single tenant industrial as well. Our tenants are the sort of category leaders in their respective categories. These are the tenants the retailers that you know their names, you use them, they trust them. They are tenants that have business plans that have survived the great financial crisis. They have survived the e-commerce onslaught of Amazon. They survived the COVID pandemic. And so we're focused on really credit retail tenants, Target, the Walmarts, the auto zones, the pharmacies, kind of those names that you sort of know and trust. And again, we're sort of agnostic to state, but very, very focused on the residual of the real estate and where that real estate sits within its particular MSA.
Will you step back and give us kind of a 30,000-foot view of where are we at in single tenant net lease investing right now? Where have we been over the last few years, and where do you think we're headed?
It's a great question. It's kind of a loaded question. So I'll take it back. I mean, the interesting thing about, I guess I would say my expertise is really STNL retail. So this interesting thing about STNL retail is it wasn't that long ago that it wasn't recognized even as a designated sector. So about, say, 2012, 2013, STNL retail was really recognized as its own sort of asset sector or asset class by organizations such as the International Council of Shopping Centers. If you fast forward today, there are tons of trade organizations and trade conventions focused solely on single tenant net lease retail, which previously never existed. If you bought single tenant net lease retail, people said, well, you're just some kind of outlet guy, right? You buy the outlots in front of a shopping center, so to speak. And so the industry really took off following the great financial crisis in '08. So from '08 to about 2018, there was a rampant growth in that market. Obviously, it correlated with the growth of the various retailers and the QSR tenants that have been growing within those sectors. And then as this sector continued to grow, there became a subspecialty within the brokerage community. And so you saw a number of brokerage firms branch out. A number of brokerage firms were formed. It's called boutique firms, formed specifically to focus on the sale of single tenant net lease retail assets. And within those various brokerage firms, you had brokers that were specializing in particular categories. I mean, today you have brokers that only sell STNL pharmacies. They only sell STNL automotive, to the point that you got guys that only sell one product. They only sell O'Reilly's. They only sell AutoZone. So it became sort of highly specialized. And where I think, the industry has been is we were on a massive trajectory, through COVID. COVID hit, and obviously the entire market came to a standstill for about 6 months. But what most people don't know, and what I think is very interesting, is that for about the year and a half post-COVID, was some of the best transactional volume within the STNL retail space. And so you had a confluence of low interest rates, you had high transactional volume, you had deals that were selling at some of the lowest cap rates in history. And so there was a tremendous amount of transactional volume. And then it started coming to almost a screeching halt in the early, say, Q1, Q2 of 2023 as interest rates started to rise. And so, long-winded answer to your question is, where are we today? Today, we're calling the market today the great repricing. And so you've got a significant slowdown in transactional volume. If you look at the public recorded filings of some of the public brokerage firms out there, they've said that transactional volume is down anywhere between 70 to 80% year over year from 2022 to 2020 or 23 to 24. You've got interest rates at historic highs, so you've got a ton of sellers that have continued to sit on the sidelines and buyers that have continued to sit on the sidelines as they're sort of waiting out to see what's going to happen with interest rates and what's going to happen with cap rates. And, more specifically, what we've seen is a significant rise in cap rates and devaluation of these assets over the past 12 months as the market has shifted, which to us is fantastic. It has created a huge opportunity for us on the buy side. And so we've been very excited about this disruption, because whenever there's disruption, there's opportunity. And we've been doing our utmost to seize the opportunities within this market.
Great. That was really helpful. Will you go a little deeper into Ironside's business strategy in terms of the types of lease structure you're looking for, if you're doing development or buying existing, if you're looking for value add and distressed kinds of things? What is your business strategy?
Sure. So we are focused on working with sort of the top 2 to 4 operators within each sector. Our business is divided into 2 distinct silos. So we've got our acquisition platform where we're buying existing operating properties. And then we've got our development group that is focused on relationship related development for retailers that we've had long term relationships with, where we can help them execute their growth strategies by adding either ground up new stores, greenfield sites, or what we call brownfield sites, finding existing buildings and adaptively reusing them for their and specifically building them for their product type. I would tell you that the development side of the business, and this is across the entire board, is down significantly. That has to do with a number of factors, including the increased cost of debt. Construction loans are significantly higher than they were a year, 2 years ago, so that has slowed down development. Plus, at the same time, you've got the continued increase in goods and cost of construction, which has resulted in that slowdown. But what we found is that this market has created some really unique buying opportunities for us. Although there are less number of deals on the market today, the quality of the deals that are out there are significantly better than the deals that we're seeing for the last 2 to 3 years. And generally speaking, those sellers have some reason for them to bring those deals to the market, and therefore they're serious about transacting. So we've been very blessed, Jonathan. We're very fortunate that a number of the deals that have come to us on the acquisition side have really been off-market deals brought to us by strategic broker partners who said, hey, I represent this family. They're in some state of distress. They have a need to close. They need certainty of execution. They don't have the time to go through a full marketing cycle. We know you guys are a qualified all-cash buyer. We're going to bring you the deal. If you can hit this number, it's your deal to transact. And so it's been very, very unique, dramatically different than what we've seen over the past 24 months. 24 months ago, people would bring a deal to the market, and the day it hit one of the listing services, they were going to get 2 to 4 offers, probably at or close to ask. Today, that is not the case. Completely different ball field.
So you've alluded now to opportunity a couple times. You just gave us the example of getting off-market leads from brokers that tell you if you can hit a number, then it's yours. Tell us about some of the other opportunities that you're seeing while other people are experiencing some displacement in the marketplace. You are seeing opportunity. Can you talk more about the opportunity that you're experiencing right now?
Yeah, sure. I think there's been some, obviously with the cap rate movement, there's been some opportunities to buy deals that historically wouldn't have met our investment thresholds, just because 2 years ago, those cap rates were trading below 6 caps. And today you might be able to get them for a 6.5 or a 7. So we have been able to buy certain credits or certain tenants that historically would have been too expensive for us. There's also been some unique opportunities for us to come in and sort of act as rescue capital for either developers that had started a project and have found out that they've had some issues with raising the equity they need to complete the project, or those who have a portfolio of deals that they were taking to market but aren't necessarily getting the cap rates that they expected when they started the project, and therefore they're willing to divest of those assets at lower pricing, which is more competitive for us. So again, I think whenever you're in a disruptive state, there's opportunities, and so this disruption has created these sort of unique opportunities. And then I think most importantly for us is, at least within the, I'll call it, defined space where we transact, historically our competitors have been 1031 investors. And so the 1031 market, as you probably know, is down close to 80% year over year. So those buyers are completely off the table. Oftentimes, not always the case, but oftentimes those buyers are more motivated by just replacing their proceeds, and therefore they will overpay for an asset, which was part of the reason that I think cap rates were continuing to compress year over year. And so that element has been taken off of the table, which has really sort of right-set the market. So I think those are kind of the unique opportunities that we haven't necessarily seen for the past several years.
Will you talk about, as the market has shifted with interest rates, has your strategy shifted with the increase of interest rates, or how has the changing capital markets issues played a role in your decision-making process?
Yeah, it has. So we are an all-cash buyer, which is very, very unique. We pride ourselves on, we're a entrepreneurial organization that has institutional experience. But what we do is we move faster than the competition. And so one of the competitive advantages if someone decides to work with Ironside Realty on a deal is that they know there's going to be a certainty of close, that we're an all cash buyer. There's no financing contingency. So that takes an element of risk off the table. We also have, proven systems, processes, and procedures in place that allow us to move very, very quickly. Typically speaking, our average deal from LOI execution to close is under 45 days, which is lightning quick in this market. And so the advantage these buyer has is they get to work with what effectively is an institutional grade type tenant on a small project point, where they wouldn't have necessarily that same experience if they were working with a 1031 buyer. And so that has proven to be sort of an effective strategy for us.
I'd love to ask you more about those processes. So when you
Sure.
get a deal under contract, and it is without a doubt a competitive advantage for you as a buyer, if you can go in and say, hey, these are 5 deals or 10 deals that we've closed recently, and this is the speed at which we moved, and these are our processes. We're going to close if we get this under contract. So will you talk about some of your processes, whether it's, environmental stuff or surveys or, your team members? How can you have such a competitive advantage to get everything in place so quickly that you feel confident in making a multi-million-dollar purchase faster than almost anyone else?
It's a great question. So we do all the hard work up front. So once we know, for us, everything is about time. So we have put together an industry-leading team of vendors that work with us on all of our acquisitions. So we have one of the largest due diligence companies in the country. They have a group assigned to Ironside Realty they handle all of our property condition assessments, our environmental reports, our zoning compliance reports. We have another contract with the country's largest title company to expedite the receipt of our title commitments and also surveys. And the attorney firm that we work with, they've done hundreds and hundreds of these transactions. And so we have crafted a purchase agreement that is very mutually beneficial and friendly to the seller. We find that, people get interesting and they try to throw tricks into their purchase agreements. There's no reason for us to run that type of a process. We are also extremely hands-on with our sellers and communicative with them on where we are in the process. So once an LOI is executed, we immediately, before even a PA is issued, we have our proposals in hand from our third-party vendors with defined dates within which they will have those reports completed. Generally speaking, they'll get those reports done within 25 to 26 days from the day we release them. We turn around our purchase agreements within 24 hours to 48 hours of the day a fully executed PSA is received, even if that's over a weekend. And once the PSA is signed, the day it is signed, we release third-party reports. If we're fortunate enough that our seller has prior reports that we can use to help expedite that process, we will do so. And again, as we go through our diligence process, we're providing the seller's brokers or the seller directly with updates on where we are. So if we uncover any issues, we want to bring it to their attention early and quickly and work together to try to resolve an issue. I think one of the other competitive advantages that we have is because of our vast development expertise. We've run across a million different issues that you would typically run across in a sort of single tenant net lease asset transaction. And so we, either between us or our vendor partners, we've found solutions. And so we've got ways to work through, title issues, survey issues, whatever zoning issues that might be, that a typical 1031 buyer doesn't have the sophistication level to do so. And so I think that adds a competitive advantage. I mean, frankly, we have brokers that come to us quite often and say, we have a deal. We know that there's an environmental concern. Here it is. Would you guys be able to get past this or work with us to get past this? And that has separated us from multiple buyers in the past.
Yeah, no doubt that when you have the team and the expertise to take on some of those challenges, it sets you apart and puts you at a competitive advantage. I bought a deal last year that had an environmental sort of question mark. It required a phase two, and another buyer ahead of me backed out because they didn't want to mess with the
Sure.
phase two. I was willing to take on that phase two, and it turned out to be no big deal, and I ended up with a great deal. And so it, you know, it, yeah, can't stress enough that yeah, I totally agree with you that when you're willing to take on some of those challenges, and does it go back to having a team involved, and just having, whether it's an environmental team or that title team, just say, hey, here's an issue, can you look into this, and do you think we can overcome this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I firmly believe I want to be at the table. I want to be the dumbest guy at the table. So I continually surround myself with people that are subject matter experts in what they do. And that's why we've picked the vendor partners that we have. We've signed national agreements with them. They see these things day in and day out. And if they don't have the answer, they know who to call to get the answer. And generally speaking, that's one of the reasons I think we've got the reputation for certainty of close. The sellers love that because oftentimes they're not trying to hide something. Quite frankly, they're not sophisticated. They didn't even know that problem existed. And so it's going to be their problem whether we close on the asset or not. So we're looking for a solution. And fortunately for us, we've not run across a transaction to this point that we haven't been able to work through. And I think the sellers often appreciate that level of communication. The worst thing in the world I know, being a seller at times as well, is when someone ties up your property, they spend 2.5 weeks telling you nothing and everything is fine. Then all of a sudden they raise an issue that if you knew 2 weeks ago, you could probably resolve in 10 days, but now it's going to take an additional 2 to 3 weeks to resolve, and it just slows everything down. So yeah, surrounding yourself with the right team is key, and that was one of the most important things we did when we set up our acquisition platform, and that has really allowed us to move quickly and scale, and it's given us the reputation of closing quickly and allow us to compete against, frankly, our bigger competitors, which has always been our goal.
Yes, when you're the smaller guy, sometimes you can be a little more agile and more
Yes.
flexible and responsive, more so than the bigger competitors. You talked about closing all cash deals. Do you keep it in all cash, or do you refinance pretty quickly after you purchase?
No, today everything has been kept all cash. Eventually, we'll get to a point with some of our funds when sort of the interest rates stabilize a little bit that we'll do a sort of portfolio refinancing. But the thesis at this point was to take advantage again of this disruption in the market and the pricing, close all cash, use that to our advantage. And then when interest rates stabilize a bit, we'll layer some debt on as appropriate. But we have not financed pre-closing any debts or secured debt pre-closing any deals just because our deals move so quickly. If you think about it, generally speaking, it takes 30 to 45 days for really 45 days in this market for any lender to close a deal. By the time they go through capital committee to get approval, they get their appraisals. We're closing, and from LOI to PA close is under 45 days. So the banks can't keep up with us. So it just hasn't made sense. And it has really worked out to our advantage. And so we're going to continue to do that for the foreseeable future. And it's been a great success for us.
I'd love to ask more about this all cash strategy. I've talked with several people recently who are really doubling down on an all cash strategy. And seasoned real estate investors might say, this is heresy. How could you not be using debt? Even if, with the kinds of deals that you're buying, you might be in maybe a slightly negative leverage situation. You'd still have more capital available to go buy more deals if you just refinance either a month or 2 or 6 after closing the deal. So is your all cash strategy, is it more of a safety and security in the economics of it? Or is it just what you talked about with just the ability to move fast? Will you talk more about your philosophy of your all cash strategy?
I mean, if you look, even interest rates are going down, not significantly, but they're stabilizing over the past 6 months. And so from our perspective, we are fortunate that we have the capital available to invest all cash. It allows us to buy deals more competitively. So until we get to the point that we really need to do a refinance, which will be part of the plan probably in the next 6 to 12 months as the debt market sort of stabilizes itself, then yes, we'll go in and on a portfolio level basis, we will put some debt on and then we'll redeploy that capital as necessary. But it's just not the right time. It's still too much volatility in the market. I personally think that there's a new norm coming with debt. And I think, the days of financing in a 3.5 to 4% range are gone. And so we're also seeing cap rates continuing to rise. And I don't think that it is the right time for us to be layering on debt for kind of the deals that we're doing. And so we're going to wait 6 months from now, we'll reevaluate that. I mean, 90 days ago, there were a number of lenders that weren't lending that today are now calling us saying, hey, we're about to get back into the game. And I think that number is going to continue to increase, when we get to sort of August or September of this year. And then clearly, once we get through the election, I think there's going to be a larger access to capital. Now, where those rates will be, I don't know. I'm not that smart, but we'll see.
Laith, you mentioned a couple things earlier that I'd love to ask you more about. You talked about having tenants in the top 2 to 4 tenants in their sector. You also talked about buying great real estate. In the net lease world, there's this tension of you buy a property and it's got a great lease, and some people buy these properties out in the middle of nowhere, these very rural properties, say a dollar store, and they may have a great lease, but there's some risk associated with that because it may not be great real estate. And so will you talk about this tension and how you view buying these deals, that having a great lease, but also having great real estate?
Sure. That's a great question. To me, it's all about the real estate. It's location, location, location. At the end of the day, we sort of have a rigorous underwriting process, but it really focused on 3 things. Number 1, and the most important, is the real estate. Number 2 is the credit of the tenant. And frankly, number 3 is the lease structure. So if you think about it, single tenant net lease assets, what are you buying? You're buying a 100% occupied asset. So that's good day one in the sense that you've got income coming day one. You don't have to worry about lease up risk or timing. But again, you have to focus on what's the credit of that tenant, because you're banking on that tenant not only being there for the remainder of the base term, but hopefully exercising all of their available options down the road. So our number 1 factor is always location and underwriting the residual of the real estate. Where is that real estate located? Is it on the main retail corridor in a particular submarket? What are the traffic counts? What are the demographics? Are the demographics trending positive or negative? Is there growth coming to the market? What are the surrounding retailer drivers? Is it an outlot in front of a super target that's recently been remodeled? Or is a new super target been built on the other side of town and this is the old retail corridor? We're looking at, what does the access look like? Are we on a hard corner? Are we mid-block? Do we have a full access intersection? What's the lot configuration look like? If for whatever reason that tenant was to leave, what constraints would we have to redevelop that property? I mean, if you look at it, that's the big question today in the pharmacy space, right? What do you do with those 12 to 14,000 square foot boxes all over the country that are closing, the former Rite Aids or the Walgreens that'll be closing or have already closed? And so, our number 1 criteria is the real estate. I will tell you, there's a lot of folks that say, oh, I'll buy a Dollar General in the middle of nowhere because it's credit tenant and it's a great lease. But what do you do with that at the end of that lease term? It's a Butler building. It's probably not worth the land that it's sitting on. And so we shy away from those types of assets. And I think that's where, our development expertise really helps give us a competitive advantage, because we understand a site. Can it be redeveloped into a QSR? Can you add a drive-through at some point if you need? What is the worst case scenario here? And then where are you buying it? Are you buying this asset at or below replacement cost? Where is the rent compared to market rents? Again, going back to my pharmacy reference, most of these pharmacies were built to suits. But I used to be a preferred developer for Walgreens. So you were building these things back at a time where all of the costs were being capitalized into the rent. So you have, in some cases in major metros, you've got rents in the mid to high 30 a foot range. The backfill counter today is a dollar store, a Dollar Tree for the most part. Dollar Tree's not going to pay much more than probably $8 to $12 a foot. So and you've got very limited ability to retrofit that building. They don't break into multi-tenant very easily. There's very few tenants, single tenant tenants that'll come in and take that entire box, and so it's a challenge. So again, long answer there is the residual of the real estate is, in my opinion, the most important factor.
Do you all own any pharmacies?
Not currently. We sold them.
Okay, well that's looking pretty good in hindsight.
We did. We own several Walgreens and CVS's. I think they're a great brand. I think that they serve a purpose. But there's, I'll tell you an interesting story, if I may. So
please.
In 2010, when I was at Agree Realty, our top three tenants were Kmart Corporation, Borders Books, and Walgreens. And I had the opportunity to go to a meeting. We actually owned Borders Books corporate headquarters in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I had an opportunity to go meet with their CEO, their CFO, and their head of real estate at the time. And if you recall, in 2010, Borders Books was the place to be if you wanted to grab a coffee and study, if you wanted to buy a CD, or if you wanted to actually go look at a book or maybe buy a book. I'm not sure that they sold that many books. And Amazon had just come out. Amazon at the time, if you remember when Amazon started, it was an online book retailer. They didn't sell other goods, they just sold books. And so Borders Kingpin, what they said was going to save their company. They had launched an e-commerce platform. They had launched a website that they were losing about $20 million a year on. And their solution to how they were going to rival Amazon was the ebook reader. And what happened? 6 months later, they filed bankruptcy. And we owned several Borders. And so for about a year and a half, our team had the painstaking task of figuring out what to do. So tying back to your last question, fortunately, these were all fantastic pieces of real estate, and the residual value was in the real estate. These were outlots to high-performing malls on major retail corridors. The buildings were frankly oversized, but we were able to go find alternative use tenants in many instances that would go in and they would pay rents higher than what Borders were paying. And so that was a painstaking lesson I learned about how important it is to find and underwrite the residual of the real estate, because at the time when our predecessor, the owner of the company, was developing Borders, they were one of the top retailers in the country. Who would ever think that Borders would one day go bankrupt? Same thing with Walgreens. At one point, right, Walgreens was one of the fastest growing retailers in the country. We're now in a position where, unfortunately, they've recently lost their CEO. They've had a credit downgrade. They're no longer investment grade credit. And you've got mass closings coming on a horizon here. So again, it always gets down to location, and what's the value of the real estate. That's what you're buying.
Laith, you have experience in backfilling spaces and even some adaptive reuse. So when it comes to these pharmacy buildings, these properties, do you have any thoughts on the future of these properties? If pharmacies have a chance, or what an ideal adaptive reuse for these properties could be?
It's a great question, and it's the billion-dollar question. I keep saying, if I can find that tenant, I'm going to buy up every closed dark pharmacy in the country. I think it comes down to local and regional real estate. At one point, we always thought that they were the perfect candidate for Amazon, and Amazon could use them as mini hub locations for pickup and deliveries. And there was a thought at one point that, Amazon had started to sort of enter into the C-store space. They've obviously entered into the grocery space, and then they've pulled that back. I think it makes adaptive reuse into sort of the medical clinics and or physical therapy centers make a lot of sense. I've even seen a few recent redevelopments where a group has gone and they've been able to redevelop them, keeping two of the walls into an express car wash, which has been sort of an interesting thing to see. The challenge is that the configuration of the buildings don't make a ton of sense to divide into a multi-tenant property. And so, but again, they're generally speaking well situated pieces of real estate. They're generally hard corner intersections in decent metros. So if the value really is probably going to be in the land, tearing the building down and redeveloping it.
I've asked several people this question, and they all have really similar answers in that there's probably not one savior that's coming
Yeah,
down the line that is going to lease up all these vacant drugstores. It's going to
sure.
be a mix. I've seen, like you said, I've seen uh, like a medical use go in there. I've seen physical therapies go in there. I've not seen the car wash. I would love to see that. And I was going to ask you if these properties, just the way they're built, are could be easily demised into multi-tenant properties, but you beat me to it, and you said really not. And these buildings are a tricky size because
Yeah,
retail is a lot of retail is booming right now, but in the smaller footprint space, those
sure.
10 to 12 to 14,000 square foot is that's a big box right now, and
It is.
could be hard to fill for a single tenant. I'm wondering, are there certain markets or certain tenants that you are especially excited about right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, love the Southeast. I've done a lot of development and acquisition in the Southeast, and you continue to see growth there. Texas is a huge focus for Ironside. We've acquired and developed a number of opportunities in the greater Texas area. In terms of particular tenants, again, category killers. Huge fan of Walmart. They're not going anywhere. They're one of the world's largest retailer. I think we're going to see a big fan of Aldi. We're going to see a lot of growth with all these recent acquisitions they announced. Another 400 plus locations coming into the United States, and those sectors in which again are have proven e-commerce business platforms. We are very bullish and have created a specialty in the collision space. You're not going to a neighborhood bump shop. I mean, if I unfortunately bang my car, you can't just bump out the bumper anymore with all the sensors and all the technology related with today's vehicles. You're going to replace an entire panel of a car. And so we've done development and have been very, very, very active in acquiring collision centers. And same thing with industrial outdoor storage. I think there's a huge need for it. We've found great success there. We found that there has been a massive buyer pool for ISO sites and have been very focused on that as well.
I love your niche in the collision centers. Those properties seem to still trade at pretty strong cap rates. And I mean, if there's, there are several, but that's definitely a product type or a category of retailer that is virtually Amazon proof. As far as I know,
Right.
Amazon is not repairing cars right now, and there's no sign of an e-retailer starting to repair cars and repair bumpers with all the sensors, like you mentioned. It's a specialized process, and
Yeah.
there are some quality tenants that really seem to be growing in that space. I think about Caliber Collision. I don't know if they're a tenant of yours, but they seem to be a tenant that is really growing, and those properties seem to trade at really strong cap rates, and so
That's
that
correct.
that seems to be a great tenant. Laith, can you identify a few things that have been instrumental in growing your business?
Yeah, I think relationships is by far number one. I think you look back. I mean, Ironside Realty as a company is still a young, emerging organization, but frankly, Ironside Realty was started 20 years ago when I got into this business. And it was based upon the relationships that have transformed over time. And what's really interesting, particularly about the niche space that we transact in, is that it's a very small world. And so oftentimes a lot of the real estate managers that, I just had a call last week with a woman who, I ran into her at four different retailers over the past 20 years. They tend to sort of work within the same realms, or everybody's two people removed from each other within the business. And so, relationships has been a huge key to our success and the growth of, I think, my professional career. And the one thing that I aspire to do is to provide more value to the people that I interact with than I receive. I am very much a believer in sharing real-time information in the market and what we see. And I think that information is very, very valuable, specifically to our retail partners. They're not involved in the investment sale community as actively as we are. And so oftentimes, we'll share with them where we see cap rates trending, where we see, lease rates trending, what we're hearing on the street, which is helpful to them. And then vice versa, they're willing to share, so long as it's not, confidential material or information, they're willing to share information on growth strategies and other things that make us a better investor and a better developer. Understanding where they're going, you can see the shift over the years, right? Where retailers went big and now they're starting to consolidate and get smaller. The box sizes are getting smaller. The demographic sort of requirements might be changing. Stupid example, but when Starbucks started, they would go in line in a shopping center. Today, you're not going to develop a Starbucks without a drive-through, if not maybe two drive-throughs. And so, relationships, I think, by far is the key. And I alluded to it earlier, surrounding yourself with people that are subject matter experts in their particular role and relying upon them and knowing who to go to in a particular situation to get the answer and to get it quickly. So that I think is the most important thing.
And a related question: have there been
Sure.
any like anything in your network, mentors, anything instrumental, conferences, groups that you're a part of that have helped your business grow?
Yeah, there's been several. I think one of the things that I do is I proactively reach out to people on my own, and so it has been important. Earlier in my career, I took a very active role in the International Council of Shopping Center Organization, ICSC. I encourage all young folks to do that. They've got a next generation group, which some of the young guys on my team are required to join. I think it's a phenomenal organization. You're working with people that are playing within your specific niche, and it's an opportunity for networking, and those relationships will grow over time and get you access to folks that you might normally not get access to. But I'm a firm believer in just reaching out. And so if I'm, looking to work with, it's not unusual for me if I'm looking to acquire a new tenant and I'm familiar with them, I will call their CEO and to get to the point where they put me in contact with the right person to get the answer I need. And it's a people business. People like to do business with people they like, and then eventually they learn to trust. And so if you can continue to add value to those relationships, it's amazing what kind of referrals will come back to you. So we've gotten away from that. I think the most interesting thing with email and social media is, people want to go quick. They want to text. They want to act like they're busy, but they're not really advancing anything or adding value. And so to the extent that, you can add value to someone in the form of a relationship, I think that's going to come back tenfold down the road.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. A personal rule that I have is if I'm writing an email and if it's longer than a paragraph, I stop and I pick up the phone and
Yep.
I make it a phone call instead.
100%. 100%.
Laith, you started Ironside. We're going on 13 years ago now. I'm wondering if there have been any significant inflection points in your business because, going out on your own, it's a big step. When you're working for someone else, there's a certain amount of security there. You have other people sort of running the ship, but then now it's your ship. And so
Sure.
I'm wondering if there have been any inflection points or lucky breaks or just moments of great impact that you've had that have really helped your business grow.
Yeah. So we're still young, right? This is our third year. And I left a transition of a very large public company, to your point, where it was sort of a safe and steady, and very proud of what we accomplished there during my time. And so I think, the biggest thing whenever you make that leap is I'm never off. I'm always thinking about the business. It is a part of my life. It is a passion. I obviously have gone all in. My entire wealth and strategy and my family's livelihood is relying upon my ability to get up and kill the elephant every day. So I'm always on the hunt. And so I think for me personally, it plays in the fact I'm an ultra competitive person. I hate to lose and I love to compete. And more importantly, I think I enjoy the process. And so I think a lot of people are focused on, the get rich scheme and the Instagram money and all that, the junk that's really truly not what people are doing. For me, it's about the building and the mentoring and the growing and the process of creating something. And, we're building something truly great here, one brick at a time. And, the most important thing is to be humble and understand that, when you're running a business like this, there's days I'm taking out the trash. There's days I'm up till 2, 3 in the morning working on books and records and leases or whatever it needs to be done. But the buck stops there. And you have to walk the walk before anybody that on your team is going to do it with you. And so you lead by example, and hopefully those folks will continue to follow. I've been very blessed. The people on my team are very hardworking, very smart, very committed, frankly, much smarter than me. And we have a lot of fun. I mean, we move very, very, very quickly. But that's what you have to do. The market is moving quickly and it's moving very dynamically. And so if you're not willing to adapt and adjust and to get outside of your comfort zone, you're done in this business. You have no shot. You should just give it up.
Laith, this has been a great conversation. I really admire what you're doing. Love your strategy, the all cash purchases of high quality tenants, great real estate in great locations, and your focus on relationships to build your business. Is there anything about single tenant, net lease, retail, or industrial that we haven't talked about that you feel like needs to be said?
No, I think the most important thing people should do is if you're interested in getting involved in commercial real estate, I think this is a great sector to start. Generally speaking, the average STNL deal is about a $2.5 million deal. So unlike multifamily or office or some of the larger industrial deals, they're at manageable price points. There are, as I alluded to earlier, there are thousands and thousands of these transactions and opportunities for transactions that are trading hands on an annual basis. So it's a great opportunity for somebody to dip their toe into the commercial sector and to see if it works for them as an investment strategy. I mean, it's been phenomenal for us. I think the most important thing that, we look at is that really this is about as close to bondable real estate as you can get. And so, we have, we may not be getting 30% returns that some folks have gotten in how much higher riskier deals, but at the same time, these are really good risk adjusted returns and very repeatable. And so we're hitting, singles and doubles every day, but when you add those up, you really can create quite a portfolio very, very quickly. And so I would just encourage folks, if you're interested in getting in commercial real estate, take a look at jumping in the STNL game. And the best thing you can do is just start. Take a shot.
Laith, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. If listeners want to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing at Ironside, where would you like to send people?
Sure, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, or they can reach out on our website, ironsiderealty.com. All my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to speak with anyone.
Thank you so much for joining me, Laith.
This was great. Thanks for the opportunity. Be well.
Listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, reach out to either one of us. We love talking about commercial real estate, and we would love to connect with you. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, take care.